Hey, did I ever tell you the story of how we moved from Ontario to Nova Scotia? It's kind of a fun story. I won't get into all of the details today, but it did include us having to figure out how to move 4 horses, 3 goats, a mini pig, some cats, a tank of fish, and 19 dogs. Did it include the purchase of a school bus? Yes, yes, it did. I told you, it's a good story, but for another time. Today, I actually want to talk about what happened the day after we moved in, when we just arrived at our brand new place in Nova Scotia, which we bought sight unseen. I'm telling you, it's a good story. I'll share it sometime, but we bought it sight unseen, and I was taking a group of the dogs, not all the dogs, but I was taking a group of the dogs. One of them was Apollo, my pit bull greyhound mix, and 2 of my Newfoundland dogs, Berlin and Paris, were with me. And we were just exploring, but I wanted to let him go for a little bit of a run because pit bull greyhound mix, and he needed it because he had been in a bus for 2 days. So we started heading up the hill. We bought this property on this beautiful property, and there's this great big hill, and our property went all the way back. And I wanted to go away from the road, obviously. So I start heading up this hill, and I thought, you know what? Apollo's been pretty solid lately. I'm gonna let him off the leash so that he can really stretch his legs and go for a bit of a run. So I let him off the leash, and he starts kind of sniffing around. He's all around the field, and as we come over the crest of the hill, lo and behold, there stood 8 to 10 deer just standing there, just happily grazing the top of this hill. And Apollo was probably about, I would say maybe 10, 15 feet from me when he noticed them. And he stopped, and he stopped and he stared, and he was hard staring, and the deer were frozen. And I stopped, and I went, uh-oh, because I'm great in a panic. So we all stood, frozen in time, staring, Apollo staring at the deer staring at us, and me thinking, oh, I shouldn't have let him off the leash. And at that time, I looked at him, and I said, Apollo, as calmly as I could. I was like, Apollo. And the dog turned. He literally turned his head, and he looked back at me as if to say, I'm sorry, but I gotta go. Like, his legs started shaking, like he was almost vibrating in that moment. And I went, but no. And just before I could even get the no out, there he went. Now, if you have never seen a greyhound pit bull mix run, this dog has the body of a greyhound and the head of a pit bull. So, I mean, it's glorious to see him when he fully extends and runs. But oh my gosh, was it mayhem? Because not only were there 8 to 10 deer standing there, as he ran through the long grass of the field, baby deer started popping up like whack-a-moles, just popping out of the grass everywhere. And I was like, what? I didn't know what to do. So I, like the moron that I was, start running like I'm going to chase him. There's baby deer popping up. Deer were scattering everywhere. Apollo is just running and darting and running and darting and running and darting. And as I was running, I thought to myself, well, I'm not going to get this dog back. I'm not going to get this dog back. And that was how we started our time in Nova Scotia. I'm sure the neighbors probably thought I was crazy because I was yelling, Apollo! And I finally stopped because I couldn't keep up with them. I kind of stopped, and I was out of breath, and I looked down. Of course, my 2 Newfoundland dogs, I will say this is the funny thing about the difference between the dog breeds. My 2 Newfs were literally running beside me like, what are we doing? Like, they thought it was the best time ever because, they're more into me than they are to deer. Now, spoiler alert, obviously I got the dog back. He eventually did come back, but it was a great lesson on when recall fails. So today we're talking about recall and giving you some tips on how you can not perfect. There's no perfect recall, I don't think. How you can amplify your recall results with these quick tips today. Let's get into it. Welcome to Beyond Obedience, the podcast, where we redefine dog companionship Hi, I'm Tracy Franken, your guide to build a beautiful bond that transcends traditional training. Flip the script. This is where your dog is the true expert. For dog lovers who crave more than just a pocket full of treats, this is not your typical dog training podcast. This is Beyond Obedience. Hello, 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 and welcome to Beyond Obedience, the podcast. This is podcast episode number 8, I believe. And today we are going to be talking about the also popular question and comment, recall. Oh my goodness. If I had a nickel for every time somebody filled out one of my intake forms with the complaint of my dog just won't come back when they're called, I would have a lot of nickels. So it's a popular topic, and I wanted to talk about it today because of one thing in particular. It is spring. Spring is in the air. Can you smell it? Can you smell spring and all of the goodness that is spring? Well, even if you can't smell it, I'll tell you one thing, your dog sure as heck can. Your dog sure as heck can. Spring is probably the best time for dogs. Everything is starting to come up from underneath the snow and all of the great smells. Everything is starting to get all, spring. It's spring. So in springtime, I start to take a little bit extra precautions when I'm taking my dogs out for a walk. Dogs that I would normally say, hey, they're pretty good off leash, I'll give them that freedom. Sometimes for those dogs, I'm maybe not going to give them the same amount of freedom. Things are different in spring. Let's just put it this way. So I thought I would start to talk about this idea of recall and maybe give you guys a few things to think about when we're talking about recall, because recall is really broken down into, I like to break it down into 3 different components. 3 different components of recall. And hey, you want to know something? I always forget this. Before we get into that, let's not forget to hop on over to beyondobedience.ca and sign up for my newsletter. Where'd that come from, Tracy? That came from the fact that I want you on my newsletter. I want you in the know. Right now, the newsletter is just getting started. We're just warming up. But inside that newsletter, besides podcast episodes that we are going to be talking about, I'm also doing a question of the week. And you guys are loving it. I've had people that are reaching out going, thank you so much for answering that question for me. So if you didn't know, you can actually get your question answered on question of the week. I'm actually going to send you a video response back. So this isn't just me typing back, what my thoughts and feelings are. This is me getting in it with you on video so that you can actually get some answers to those questions. So if you haven't already, make sure you go over to beyondobedience.ca. Just hang on the page for a little bit. I mean, look around, poke around. Why not? But while you're there, a pop-up menu is going to hop up. It's going to pop up. It's going to pop up. It's going to say, hey, you want to join the Canine Chronicles? Give me your name, give me your email so that you're on that list, so that you can be the first to know about new things, new podcast things. Plus, spring is coming. We're probably going to be talking about doing some seminars. You can find out where seminar locations are. Wouldn't that be fun to hang out at a seminar with me? Darn right it would be. Think this is fun. Imagine me in person. It would be amazing. All right, let's get back to it. Let's talk about recall. So as I mentioned, I like to break recall up into 3 different components of recall. Okay, so when we're talking about a dog that isn't coming when they're called, the very first thing that we want to talk about is, in fact, the obedience of recall. Right? The obedience of recall is the actual teaching of the command. And there are a lot of dogs that haven't actually fully realized the concept of the command, that the word come means that they must come no matter what. They haven't actually learned that. So we want to make sure before we start getting into, say, corrections or telling the dog that, that it's bad for not coming when it's called, that they actually understand what it is that you're talking about. Let's not forget that this is not their native tongue. English is not their English is a second language to the dog. So we want to make sure that they fully understand the obedience of recall. Now, the obedience of recall is generally speaking taught with a leash or a long line and some food rewards, so that the dog understands when you say this word, it means you have to stop what you're doing. You have to come over to me and you're going to get something out of it, usually a treat or some sort of thing like that. So once we get to the point where we can say with about 100% certainty that we know that the dog fully does understand what the word means, the obedience of recall, next we need to move on to the reliability of recall. And reliability of recall has a lot of other different facets to it as well. The first thing that many dog owners don't necessarily recognize is the idea that dogs don't generalize commands very well. What does that mean? Basically, that means that if you teach your dog that when you say the word come, it means come and you are in your living room, when you move to even other areas of your house or the backyard or the front yard of your home, they do not necessarily know that that word means come in that location. When you are out on a walk or at the dog park or at the Home Depot or wherever you happen to be or at a friend's house, they do not necessarily generalize that the word come means come in this location. So we as dog owners and trainers have to then do what is called proofing the command. And that just means having it repeated over and over again with different locations, different times of the day, different people, right? Different distractions. We want to try to make sure the dog understands that when I say this word, it means all the time, every time, right? That's what that means. So the reliability of it depends on a lot of different proofing, a lot of different practicing, and a lot of understanding that the dog does not generalize it very well to know that you mean it all the time, okay? Now, the third part of recall that I think is quite often maybe not the one we think about the most, but the one that I think about all the time, right? Because my work here, if you've been following me for a while, you know that my work here is about building a bond with your dog, building an incredible bond with your dog so that everything else gets easier. When we work on building this bond, I'm telling you, everything gets easier, including obedience, including things like recall. Right? I don't necessarily have dogs that have recall problems because, one, they don't tend to go that far away, or two, when they do, they want to come back to me because I am awesome, because I have spent a lot of my time becoming the most amazing fun thing in the dog's life. Okay? And that's what I call the relationship of recall. The relationship of recall is you, my friend. It's all the things that you do with your dog. And believe it or not, every little thing that you do with your dog throughout the day is working on recall. How you interact with your dog, what games you play with them, what things you do with your dog, how intriguing you are, how engaged you are, all of those things help to create a bond and a relationship that makes you intriguing to the dog. Right? It makes them want to follow you. It makes them want to come back to you because you are awesome. Ask any dog trainer. Ask any dog trainer that does group classes that works on come. Ask them what they feel is probably the number one problem that dog owners have when it comes to teaching come to their dogs in class. And it literally will be that owners, now granted, I will say this, I know some of it's because we're self-conscious, right? Especially in a group setting. But one of the biggest things that dog trainers will see dog owners do is they will be the least entertaining or fun thing at the end of that recall, right? We will say to people, we're like, okay, when you call them, you're going to back up, you're going to act all excited, you're going to be like, yes, and you're going to really celebrate the fact that your dog came back to you. And then we'll hand it over to them. We'll be like, okay, you go now. And they'll be like, come, good dog. And then they reach for their treat pouch. And we're like, wow, that's not fun. That's not fun. Your dog's not going to want to come to that every single time. What happens if you don't have that treat pouch? What happens if you don't have that treat pouch? I want you to stop and think about that right now. What happens if you don't have that treat pouch? This is the reason why I work so hard with all of my clients to be somebody worth following, What happens if you don't have your treat pouch? First of all, if you have a dog that's only in it for the treats, how does that make you feel? You feel a little used? Do you feel like a Pez dispenser? I know the feeling. I used to be that person. I used to be the treat pouch person that was like, always had the treat pouch on me. Now I rarely have a treat pouch on me. And again, I am going to I'll do the podcast about treats. I swear I will. I will do that podcast about treats because I know people are going to be like, why don't you like treats? I do like treats, but I like treats done in the right way. You could do treats really, really well that still make you the most important part of the equation. Or you can do treats as a giant Pez dispenser. You get to decide that. All right. I'm just going to double check here what's going on. There we go. Okay. Just double checking. Sometimes I get to this point and my podcast just stops. All right. So now that we've thought about that, what happens if I don't have the treat pouch? You have to work on this idea of being somebody worth following. When you're training it, you have to be exciting. There has to be something in it for the dog beyond the treat pouch. And you have to understand that everything that you do, every interaction you have with your dog is in some way working either towards or against your recall and other obedience for that matter, but everything that you do. So if you are low on leadership points, right, on that leadership scorecard, if you've been letting your dog kind of do whatever they want, whenever they want, and you're not really aware of what's going on, if you're low in points, there's a good chance your dog's going to be like, meh, I don't want to come back to you right now. Or I'll get there when I get there. Or that squirrel is way more exciting than you, right? So if you're low in leadership points during the day, if you've allowed your dog to kind of run circles around you and you're just doing everything for the dog and not really engaging and whatnot, you're going to be low in points. If you're low in relevance points, if you have a big relevance gap, you're going to struggle with recall. So that relevance gap, let's talk about that for a second. If you haven't heard that episode, that's episode either 2 or 3. Very important episode about relevance. If you've got a big relevance gap, usually that relevance has to do with the fact that you have a very dog-like dog living a very human-like experience. And if you haven't found a way to actually make yourself a little bit more dog-like, slid yourself down that scale just a little bit, when springtime comes and you're out for your walk and all the smells are there and the dog's prey drive is just on fire, you're going to have a hard time. Kind of like me and Apollo when he saw those deer. I pride myself on my bonds and the relationships that I build with my dogs. I really, really do. But Apollo is my highest prey-driven dog. He has not only gone after prey, he has killed things. And as a result of that, the prey drive runs strong in this dog. The prey drive runs strong in this dog. But here's the thing. I know that. The mistake made that day when he took off on me was my mistake. I should have never in a million years in a brand new place after 2 very stressful days. I was not on my game. I was exhausted and emotionally just done. I have never in my life, I will tell you the story one day, but I have never in my life been that tired. I've never in my life been that relieved that I'd made it. Like there are so many things going on there. I should have never let that dog off that leash. Like that was just pure stupidity on my part. I should have known better. I can let the noose off the leash because noose, not not very much prey drive there. But for him, I should have known better. And the fact that he turned around and looked at me that day, the fact that he just kind of turned around, I swear it was like, he was like, sorry, man, I can't do it. And I actually thought to myself, yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair, right? So when you have a dog with a high relevance gap, you have a very prey-driven dog, a very high working breed dog, any of those things, and you're putting them in circumstances where you're trying to say, you know, I can trump that, you have to be a little bit humble. I've never, ever said to anybody that I am so good with my dogs that I would trump Apollo's prey drive. I don't buy that for a second. I don't buy that for a second. I'm good, but I'm not that good. So, you know, there's taking some precautions during those times when we know we're not at our best, or we know that the odds are stacked against us. And that's just being fair to the dog and fair to us. So we can work on that relationship stuff through fulfillment, through relevance, through leadership. Everything that we do helps us to be somebody worth following. And that is going to make recall so much easier. So much easier when you have a dog that wants to be with you, when you have created an experience with your dog. Like one of the biggest tips I can give for people is when we're out on our walks, and we're doing stuff, right? We're not just walking the dogs. Like I'm out walking the dogs, but I'm like searching and finding stuff. And sometimes I will take that food. If I have food, I'll take that food and I'll hide it, and then we'll find it together. And we're getting up on stumps and we're going over things, and I'm checking out stuff, and we're digging in the dirt and all sorts of great stuff. When I am doing all of that, I am creating this intrigue that when I say to them, hey, come back to me, they are going to be like, she might have found something awesome. Like she might have found something really, really good. So those are some of the ways that we can do it. We can really work on this idea of solid recall with our dogs, beyond the obedience of the dog and beyond the obedience of the recall, and beyond the reliability and the proofing, which is just practicing over and over and over again. We can actually create moments where we can really work on recall. Now, I recently did a post, and I want to share this because I love my Facebook community. I'm going to bring it back up. I love my Facebook community. Now that I have so many amazing people on there, amazing dog lovers on there. And hey, if you're listening to this podcast and you're part of my Facebook community, I love you guys. I love you guys. So I posted a video answering a question about recall, and I basically said a lot of the stuff that I'm saying today. And some people actually had some other tips, which I thought were great, so I want to share them here. Now, this is Diana. Diana actually said, I think you left one bit out for the video. And I was like, do tell, Diana. And she said, I often see owners weaken or destroy recall by calling the dog to do something the dog really doesn't like nail clipping or baths. What a great point. Oh my goodness. I was like, yes, Diana, that is a fantastic point. So, sometimes we have to call our dogs, right? Sometimes we need them to come. I always like to reserve my formal command of come for the times when I need my dog to come. And other times when I just want them to come, but there's no real big rush, I have an informal command. And that's usually just come here or just their name. Their name means come this way. But when I actually use the word come means stop what you're doing and come right now. And we would never want to use that to do something that the dog is going to dislike, like nail clipping, like having a bath if they don't like that kind of stuff. That's such an excellent point. Finding a ways. Now, she recommended go to them, like go to the dog, go get the dog if you have to do that. Absolutely love that tip. So thank you, Diana. That's a great tip. Christina actually wrote too, recall shouldn't always be the end of something. Oh, see, I love my community. Absolutely. She's like, I had neighbors that put their dog back in their house most of the time when they called her and their recall disappeared, right? So if recall is always the end of the good times, If recall means that, hey, I was out doing this fun stuff and now I'm not because that person called me and they ruined everything, then yeah, you're going to end up with a dog that's like, nah, it's not worth it for me. That's not worth it. So Christina said, I intermittently call my dog, play with her, and release her. What a great, great tip. Absolutely love that. So that was just a few of the Facebook community over on Facebook. If you're not following me on Facebook, you should. You should. Why wouldn't you be following me on Facebook? Come over and hang out on Facebook. I love the community over there. Amazing dog lovers just like you, giving tips and tricks and all of the good stuff. We try to keep it kind over there because if you don't, it'll hurt my feelings. I'll cry a little bit, but then I'll have to block you. I'm very sensitive and I don't like it. And I do believe there is just too much negativity in the dog world. We can all come together as dog lovers and help each other out. That's what it should be about. Anyway, that's it for me this week. Thank you very much to all of my Facebook friends. Thank you for those that are following me here on the podcast as well as on social media. And just a reminder, once again, if you haven't already signed up for the newsletter, please do. Please do sign up for the newsletter. That's where you're going to find out all of the good stuff that's coming up. Good stuff coming up, plus question of the week. It's good times. Good times over on the newsletter. Go to beyondobedience.ca. Just hang out on the page for a little bit. A pop-up menu is going to come up and it's going to say, hey, do you want to join the Canine Chronicles? And you're going to say, heck yeah, I want to be on that. I want to be the first to know the no's. Of course you do. Of course you do. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. As always, get out there today and be the person that your dog thinks you are, because your dog thinks you are amazing, and so do I. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll talk to you all later. Cheers.